Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Group of 5 playoff and how there's going to be a logjam. There's going to be a big heated debate in those college football playoff rooms because likely only one of them's getting in, but I could argue about 4 of them would deserve to be in at the end of the year. But that's obviously something we'll break down throughout the season. But let's get into the Power Four conferences. It still feels weird saying the Power Four, but there are a couple of teams in all of those conferences that I think could just flip them on its head, just entirely change the complexion of a conference almost overnight with some of the games that they could win. And I think there's huge teams that I need to break down here, but the biggest one, the one that I think has all the implications in the world, is Tennessee. Tennessee, there is not a limit to what this team can do this year. I understand that people have their questions about Tennessee and about how, 2022 was just a flash in the pan and they're not that actual team in real time and they won't be able to replicate that year over year. I don't know that to be the case, and only things have been getting better throughout the time of Josh Heupel's era in Tennessee. And when I look at this team, there's one big variable. There is one thing that keeps all of this from being just entirely comfortable with me saying, and them not necessarily being a team towards the top of the SEC, but being a team that is a little bit more dangerous in that dark horse type area. And it's how good that kid plays. How good does Nico Iamaleava play this season? If he hits the way that they're talking about him, this is a team that can win the SEC. Just period, end of story. And it's not just because of him, but they have the most impactful defensive player in the conference, by no question about it. James Pierce Jr. is a game changer. He is someone that in a game this year, I can almost promise you, I don't want to say anything too definitively, but this kid has a 3-sack, 2 forced fumbles, fumble recovery, maybe even a pick. He has one of those games in him. He has a game where it's his for the entire day. It's the same thing that happened with JT Tuiomalau when he went up against Penn State a couple of years ago. Just dominated that game. Won that game pretty much single-handedly for Ohio State. That is what James Pierce Jr. can do. And Josh Heupel has been doing incredible job of filling all the holes that needed to be filled, because I'm looking up and down this roster. I cannot find one. I'll just be totally honest. The receivers are better than they've ever been during Josh Heupel's time, even 2022. I'm being totally honest. Bringing in someone like Chris Brazzell is just absolutely insane. Adding to Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy, Squirrel White. It's just ridiculous what they have in that room, and it's better than a group that was really good with Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt back in the day. But the O-line adding Lance Hurd is absolutely huge to that left tackle position. A very talented kid, has not played too much football, so you got to hope he holds up the way that you're expecting him to. But if he gives Nico time, it's going to be more than fine. The schedule obviously is going to be tough. Whenever you get UGA and Bama essentially every year, it's going to be a nightmare. But beyond that, they should be favored in pretty much every game. I think every game that they play beyond that. Oklahoma, NC State, Kentucky. Those are the 3 games that I think if they go 3-0 in those games, they're going to be a 10-2 team, and they're likely going to be in the playoff. If they go 2-1, things get a little bit more sketchy. If they go 1-2, they might just be out the door. And those are games that they could go any of those in. I'll be totally honest with you, because all of those teams, while on paper don't stack up to Tennessee, at least top to bottom, they can play better football on one given Saturday, and that's all you got to do if you're those teams. So Tennessee is a championship level team. There's not a lot of things that are not in place for them to do that. If Nico hits the way that they expect him to hit, the way that a lot of people across the country expect this kid to hit, they're going to be in that conversation. And as long as they don't have a 2022 Hendon Hooker situation where a guy's on his way to a Heisman ceremony and maybe winning that award, and then he gets injured and the end of the season is not great by any means, if that doesn't happen, this team is off running. And I think this is going to be a very, very interesting thing. And the game that's obviously going to define this, if they roll against NC State, start watching this team very closely. If they win by 21 points against NC State, things get really interesting really quickly. But that'll be fascinating to watch. But the other team I want to break down is that team. NC State is a team that I think is so fascinating in the ACC. And I think when you look at this team, the big thing about it is the offense is going to be near the top in the conference. And whenever you have that, especially in a conference that it feels like a lot of all of the offenses are good. I don't necessarily have an offense in this conference, at least among the big dogs in this conference, that I think is going to be bad. The number one spot is still very much up for grabs in terms of who's going to have the best who's going to have the best offense. And NC State did a ton to put themselves in a really good position there. Bringing in Grayson McCall is huge. Jordan Waters is absolutely massive. Noah Rogers has absolutely turned heads in spring and is a very talented kid. Justin Jolie, all of those kids came in from the transfer portal on the offensive side of the ball. Those are huge pieces. And frankly, a lot of them got a hit. I think at least 3 of the 4 of those guys got a hit, including the quarterback and the running back just have to. Grayson McCall has to be great. Jordan Waters has to be great. And everything else would kind of come into play. And that leaves out the best offensive player they have, which is Kevin Concepcion. So this offense is going to be absolutely incredible. I think they did an absolute haul, and every single one of those players is going to be huge for this team. The defense is a little bit more of a worry. They were really solid a year ago, only giving up 20 points per game, but Peyton Wilson did leave, and that is the biggest player on their defense by a mile a year ago. He was so important to that team. They still have some dudes that absolutely can make some plays, but it might take a little bit of a step back. So you're likely going to need a high-level offense, but they have it. Everything is in place for this team to be high level. If they can unlock that 2021 version of Grayson McCall and get elite football out of him, things get really interesting. They could win the ACC title. They could go to the college football playoff and be the team that's kind of the TCU or the Washington of this year that just continuously wins really close matchups and finds their way into the playoffs. So it'll be a fascinating team to watch there. And now let's move up to the Big Ten and talk about the team that everyone's talking about. Nebraska is such an interesting team. I saw that Joel Klatt had one of his conversations with that guy right there, Matt Rule, and he feels very confident about this team. It's very clear that he thinks this team is capable of a ton of things this upcoming season, and among them, competing for the Big Ten. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy with the way that Nebraska has gone the last couple of seasons, but this is a team that has a lot in place. Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair were absolutely huge additions at wide receiver from the portal because not only are they experienced guys that have a lot of really good football behind them, but they're really tall. And that sounds very, very, trivial, but when you have a young quarterback who might not put the ball exactly where it needs to be every time, having guys that are long, that have really strong hands is a blessing. It is absolutely huge for that team. It's the same thing that happened at Florida State the last couple of years where Jordan Travis was a good quarterback and definitely put the ball where it needed to be, but having guys like Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson definitely helped him have that completion percentage just a touch higher than it would have been if those guys were a couple inches shorter. But overall, it's going to be great for him on that front. Gabe Ervin and Ramir Johnson, I think, are going to be great in the running game. Both those guys are going to have to be huge, but a very, very solid duo to build around there. The defense is going to be awesome. Period. End of story. They're going to be a very, very good defense. 9th in the country in returning production from an 11th defense in the country a year ago. So I have no worries about this team. I think Natch Hutchmeyer, I think MJ Sherman, Tommy Hill, all of those guys are going to be huge for this team, and they all had pretty good 2023s. I think they're going to have really good 2024s, and I think MJ Sherman might just be the game changer of that group in my eyes. So this is a team, it's going to be a good team. There's no two ways about that. I think they're going to win. Frankly, I think they will win 8 games. I feel really good about them winning 8 games. Way they get to 9, 10, maybe even beat a big-time team in Ohio State or something like that and get to 11 wins is one guy, in my opinion, and it's Jalen Lloyd. I think this guy is an absolute game changer for this team. He can open up so many things in this offense that just haven't necessarily been in the past, and he showed in them flashes last year, but the explosivity of this offense is going to be where the money is made for the most part. Isaiah Nair is a deep threat. That's just the way that he works. Jalen Lloyd is a very speedy guy that you can get the ball all over the field, and he can be a deep threat just by catching and running with the ball. So he can do incredible things, and I think this offense is going to be a little bit, segmented at points. It's going to have some really, really tough stretches. It's going to have some really, really great stretches. If you can have a deep ball, those tough stretches become a lot better if you can just hit 1 or 2 of those big time plays in a game and totally change the complexion. So I think that's really the key to this season. Can Jalen Lloyd be the player that they all expect him to be? And if he is, then things get really interesting. They could walk into that Ohio State game 8-0, and then it's off to the races. So it'll be fun to watch this team for sure. And then finally in the Big 12, I got Arizona. And I fought between Arizona and Texas Tech here. I think both those teams have a ton riding on this year and could make some big time noise, but I picked the Wildcats for one very simple reason, and it's those two guys right there. Noah Fafita and Tatori McMillan is about as good as a quarterback duo as you will see in the entire country. I could make the argument that Brady Cook and why am I blanking? Brady Cook and Luther Burden, wow, are a little bit better than him. I could make the argument that Jackson Dart and Trey Harris are up there, but this is a really good duo. And it's not that McMillan is alone out there by any means. Montana Lamonius Craig is someone that made a ton of waves in the Colorado spring game a year ago and never really quite got the production that you wanted out of him, but definitely someone that could take a big step forward. Romello Wilson is a great transfer they brought in, absolutely huge there. Another transfer they brought in was Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, a very talented kid from New Mexico State. I think this is going to just be a really, really talented group on offense, and it's the same way it was during Jedd Fisch. As long as they can get the, production and the scheme that Jedd Fisch had in place, they'll be more than fine. There's no two ways about that. So I think it's going to be a really good group overall. The defense is where they need to make a leap. Let's just be totally honest. The front seven is a lot of new guys from the portal, a lot of guys that are coming in and definitely will play some big-time roles. Jacob Manu and Justin Flo being your middle linebackers that have been there for a while definitely makes that confidence go up a little. Even if you are filling all of the spots in front of them, having those two guys as kind of quote-unquote backstops for the front seven is absolutely huge. And then you have Tacario Davis. It's a name that some of you might know right now, but everyone will know very, very soon. This is a guy that flirted with the portal but made his way back to Tucson, and bringing back or keeping Noah Fafita and Tatori McMillan in town was as big of a move as there was for Arizona this offseason. This was number 2, and it was very, very close number 2 because this guy is so, so talented, likely will be a first-round draft pick, frankly, from that cornerback position. So this is going to be incredible. This team absolutely can take over the Big 12 in their first year. They just got to find some of that magic that they found late last season a little bit earlier in the season. They have games at Utah and at Kansas State in week 3 and 4, and those could kill the Wildcat season, or they could make them the team that everyone is chasing in that conference. So it's going to be fascinating to watch this team. I think they have so much going into this season, and there's so many guys like Tacario Davis, like Noah Fafita, like Tatori McMillan that are going to have plenty to say about this season and are plenty talented to make it really, really good for them. So I think there's a ton of teams that I didn't even mention in this that could turn their conference on their head. But when I look at those 4 in particular, it's a different level that they could hit. I think all of those teams have in them a run to their conference title game. Whether or not they get there might be a little bit tougher. Nebraska definitely has a little bit tougher of a path than some other teams. Tennessee, the same exact thing. But all of these teams are capable of some really remarkable things and just can't wait to see how their seasons unfold. But let's take our third break here. When we come back, it's all about recruiting because the last 5 days have been just insane. So I want to break down everything you guys need to know, including Texas Longhorns moving in the wrong direction on the recruiting trail. So we'll break that down right after this.